Motorbike racing tyres are smooth almost all of the time, which are more commonly known as slicks. They don't have any tread or grooves on them. But if you look at every single bike on the road, you'll see that they all have treads and grooves on them. So why are racing tyres different? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly why. Smooth tyres with no tread on a bike on the road is very bad. It means they're worn out, which means a crash could be imminent around the next corner. So no tread and no grooves means no grip. Well, not exactly. If we take a look at the tyres from a race bike, they're completely smooth. But a race bike needs grip. Grip means speed. Well, you see, grip isn't generated by the tread or grooves at all. It's something completely different. Surprisingly, there's also a safety element to having smooth tyres, and I'm going to dive into all of these points later on. Race tyres also need to be specifically built and are outside of the normal process for a road tyre. So to make the rest of the video make sense, let's quickly go over what a tyre is made of and how it's assembled. Now, the actual production of individual tyres between individual companies may be slightly different, and the process itself is extremely complicated, but the general gist is this. The tyre is made up of different materials such as rubber, which is fairly obvious, but this could be natural or synthetic. Continental tyres even started to experiment with making tyres out of dandelion roots. This is also incredibly complex, and I'm not going to go into it in this video. There's also some additives like carbon and black silica, and you also have reinforcement materials like steel, polyester and nylon to help keep the tyre's shape on the rim. There's oils and resins and even chemicals to help with something called vulcanization, which is basically a fancy word for the process of hardening rubber. Now, to make this perfectly clear, I'm not an engineer or anything like that. I'm simply giving an overview of the process from research that I've done. So we now know the elements of a tyre, but how are they put together? Well, you have the bead wire to provide an airtight seal when the tyre is on the rim. You'll then have a few different layers which make up the carcass of the tyre, and then finally you have the rubber, which is the part of the tyre that's in contact with the road. Perfect, so now we know how a tyre is made and what it's made up of. So how does a tyre with no tread generate more grip? Well, as I said earlier, the grip doesn't come from the grooves or tread. It instead comes from the friction of the tyre and the road. Now, it's important to keep in mind that friction doesn't propel the bike forward. Friction is a force that acts against the motion. What happens is friction builds up between the surface of the tyre and the road, which can prevent skidding or loss of traction. When you're riding along, a single point of the tyre comes into contact with the road and propels the bike forward. This is known as the contact patch, and the contact patch changes hundreds of times a second. At any one point, a team wants to maximize the contact patch between the tyre and the road. By increasing the contact patch, there's less load on a specific point of that tyre, which allows the bike and the rider to go faster. It also increases the grip level the tyre provides. So with this in mind, let's take a look at a road tyre and a race tyre. Notice the grooves in the road tyre actually take away some of the surface area that would otherwise be in contact with the road. A race tyre which is smooth doesn't have these grooves, which increases the contact patch between the tyre and the road, which gives more grip, allowing the rider to go faster. Now, this makes perfect sense in today's world. More contact patch is better. But this wasn't always the case, and the governing body of motorbike racing, the FIM, was strongly against the idea of slick tyres. Back in the 1960s, when everyone was focused on safety, the tyre manufacturer Dunlop invented the now very common triangle profiled tyre, which maximised the contact patch on corners. This was in itself a revelation. But as time went on through the 60s and 70s, bikes became much more powerful and a lot faster. And the conventional tyre at the time just couldn't keep up. So the solution was to remove the tread. Simple. Now, slick tyres were incredibly primitive when they first came out, naturally. And riders like Agostini even went so far as to run a slick rear tyre and a treaded front tyre to reduce the vibrations within the bike. Now, these vibrations, also known as chattering, were caused by the tyres simply providing too much grip, and they can become increasingly problematic and dangerous the longer they happen. While all of this was going on, the FIM and the riders were becoming increasingly divided on their view of slick tyres. And the FIM even went as far as banning slick tyres from being run in the lower tier categories. Although pretty much everyone ignored this, and they still supplied all of the riders with slick tyres. It all came to a head in the 1970s, where the riders demanded the use of slick tyres and to ban anyone not running them from racing. Finally, the FIM begrudgingly agreed, and the rest is history. Now, you may be asking, what about when they race in the wet? Obviously, they can't race with slick tyres in the wet, they instead race with groove tyres. And while the concept is the same as a road tyre, they're still manufactured specifically for race use, and you wouldn't be able to use a race tyre on the road. But what do the grooves actually do? while grooves and tread on the tyre is used to displace water away from the contact patch. This allows you to keep the tyres in contact with the road. If the water doesn't have anywhere to go, you'll start aquaplaning. Aquaplaning is when a wedge of water builds up between the tyre and the road, which effectively removes the contact patch. No contact patch equals no grip, no steering, and no braking. And a bike can very quickly become a missile with no way to steer, slow down, or stop. It's why it's so important that you check your road bike's tyres to make sure they have the correct amount of tread, to allow water to be chowned away from the contact patch. Another difference between slick tyres and wet tyres is their operating temperature. While slick tyres need to be nice and hot, wet tyres are almost the opposite and need to be cooler. A wet tyre isn't supposed to be run in the dry and vice versa. If you did, you'd be miles off the pace. A great example of this is when Brad Binder took his stunning victory at the 2021 Austrian MotoGP race. With 3 laps to go, the front pack of Marquez, Quartararo, Bagnaia and Mir all pitted in for wet tyres except Binder. After all the pit stops and with 3 laps to go, Binder was nearly 40 seconds ahead of that leading pack. After managing to keep the bike upright in torrential rain, he did win, but Bagnaia had managed to bring the gap down from nearly 40 seconds to 12, nearly 15 seconds a lap faster around a relatively short track. And while this may be the exception to the rule, it could have easily gone very wrong for Binder, and it goes to show how much slower slick tyres can be in the wrong conditions. Going back to slick tyres, there's also a pretty big safety element to running them as well. Even though more grip means the bike is able to run faster, and you will be going significantly faster than if you were running groove tyres, you have a better chance of avoiding crashes, incidents, because you have more grip. You have additional stopping power, better cornering ability. In general, you have a safer bike. And being able to make these split-second decisions can be the difference between winning and losing. So there we go. If you think I missed anything, please let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to see me do a video on anything in the future, then let me know as well. Thank you all for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.